It's Soul 6, and we're live.
And with that, welcome to this week's episode of the 800, or this month's episode of the 800s. I am your host, Alex, and you just heard from that amazing introduction from my lovely co-host Adam, and as always, thanks in the background to the man with the plan and the computer to make this all happen, Alan. That was some terrible alliteration. So with that, let's get into our plugs.
So if you joined us for our pre-show here, you heard some music that was First by Incompetech. Incompetech has a ton of super cool music and audio scores. You should check them out at incompetech.filmmusic.io. Also, we have a YouTube channel that you should check out. The link is below the video. We're DM's Table on YouTube. If you like audiobooks, you should check out Audible. If you would like to try Audible for free, go to dmstable.com/audible for a 1-month subscription. dmstable.com is where you can find out all things about us. Any link that I mentioned, as well as all other information, is available on dmstable.com. Speaking of dmstable.com, a few DMstable specific links for you. We have our Etsy page at dmstable.com/Etsy. Our socials are Facebook at the DMs Table and Twitter at DMs Table. And if you would like to have an intimate conversation with us, hit us up for our Discord link. You can hit us up on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll get you our Discord link. On our Discord, we talk all things nerdy, not just books. We talk books, D&D, 3D printing, a whole bunch of nerdy topics. So hit us up. And finally, I'd like to mention Patreon. Intimate, yes. Intimate via Strike. We get intimate on our Discord. Patreon is the main way we pay the bills around here. The link is below the video. If you would like to throw us a couple of bucks every month, you should hit up our Patreon. Main perk is that you get to vote on what book we read next. With that, I think that's all the pertinent plugs.
All right, so this month on the 800s, we will be discussing The Martian by Andy Weir. In the not-too-distant future of 2035, astronaut Mark Watney, botanist and engineer of the Ares 3 mission, awakens to find himself stranded on the planet Mars. His crew having left for Earth in the wake of an exceptionally powerful windstorm and believing Watney to be dead and impaled by a communications antenna. With no immediate means of contacting home and the next Mars mission not due for another 5 years, Mark must overcome inconceivable odds to science the shit out of his surroundings and survive to become the Martian.
I like that. I like the science the shit part. Well done.
Couldn't have an introduction without a little bit of Mark Watney's humor in there, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. This is your first time joining us tonight. I'll give you a quick rundown of how this show operates. Essentially, we are a community conversation channel. How this works is we'll have a topic or question that we're discussing. The topic or question comes from either Alex, myself, or chat. So if you have something you would like to chat about at any point during the stream, feel free to throw it into the chat. And once we have a lull in the conversation, we'll pull it and throw it out there for everyone to discuss. That means that we want to hear from you too about whatever topic or question that we're discussing. Alex and I will talk back and forth after posing a topic to give you guys a chat or a chance to chat in chat. And once we're done chatting, we'll mention anything that we see in chat that we think is cool or was mentioned on topic. So yeah, it's a conversation. It's cool conversation.
And feel free to submit your own topics as well. Cool stuff might get talked about. That being said, as usual, this is our disclaimer that this is not a kids show. This is a show for adults. We cover adult topics, themes, and say things like chemistry is a sloppy bitch. So bring kids around at your own discretion. Also, we are trying to build a fun and support community over at DM's Table where people can feel free to nerd out and be passionate about whatever they want without any fear of judgment or reprisal. So in short, be nice or fuck off.
And with that, let's get it started. Alex and Chat, what were your first impressions of The Martian?
Well, like most people, I think I saw the movie before I got around to the book. Like, it was a bestseller and everything beforehand, but it was also an incredibly popular movie with some pretty big names on it, so I think more people probably saw the movie. Anyways, going into it, I actually kind of enjoyed the tone that it struck, treating it like a diary entry. And it starts after he's left behind rather than going through the setup, so that we can kind of get a little bit of that shock value that the main character gets just waking up and it's like, oh shit, I'm stuck on Mars alone. Like, the how is less important than the what do I fucking do next, and that's a kind of a thing that keeps on happening throughout the book, and we eventually gets revisited, but it is nice to actually just kind of hit the ground rolling with this kind of book, because I think we're meant to be as kind of discombobulated as Mark is. I like the tone that was set early with like it's very clear what the danger is and how dangerous it is, while also being tossed with like a good amount of humor, which from a psychological standpoint is how you fucking survive being alone on a planet with almost no chance of survival. So early on, like I think for like the first probably 8 to 10 chapters is all just Mark surviving. And so my first impression was like I thought it was going to be all just like a diary format. And then when we get that first chapter where it cuts to Earth, I was like, oh, this is a different tone. So it was a little disjunctive when I was reading it, but like not necessarily in a bad way. I'll talk more about that when we get past first impressions. But my first impression was like, it's a good hook, good writing, and a very likable main character. So
Yeah. I had a different experience than you. I read the book before the movie. First read the book years and years and years ago. Super compelling right off the bat. It's really sucks you in and is like, what could happen? But yeah, VS Drake. Really, I read this way before the movie came out and was super stoked when I heard they were going to make it into a movie. Personally, one of my all-time favorite book adaptation movies, just because they kept real close to the source material. So, yes, I am definitely a hipster, and I liked it before it was. No, no, I think Alpac Phantom, sometimes who joins us on here, got me into it. For the mention before the movie, so
that makes sense then. And it seems like VS Drake agrees about like the tone and the diary style and the like immediately mounting drama that comes into this. And I like that the drama speaks for itself in a lot of this rather than being forced on you. I mean, part of it is because I think, as nerds, we have a semblance of like how fucking insane space travel is with our current technology. Um, so that helps a bit with that because we don't have to question as much. But the book just talks about the work that goes into everyday survival on that planet, and that in and of itself speaks for itself. He doesn't have to be like, it's dangerous, until he starts talking about like unless there's an element of humor to it, right? Like when he's talking about working with like rocket fuel, he's like, and in case you didn't know, fire bad in space. You know, so it despite being very advanced science that is potentially going on, it feels very accessible. The danger feels real, and you know, like VS Drake says, it gets into like the nitty gritty of the survival bit, which is, you know, I don't want to spend the whole time comparing to the movie, but it was nice being able to get into a bit more of the nitty gritty, which I think the book does. Well, the book absolutely does a lot more of. I mean, part of that's because he has to outline everything that he does rather than showing it, but you kind of actually get more of the actual science behind it. And as a giant science nerd myself, and to that point, that is going to be my first question. What was your favorite bit of science that was described in the book?
Really liked the way he. I mean, I guess it's kind of a toss up. I liked his space heater of uh, the reactive rock that they bury, and I also liked the way he made water uh, with the rocket fuel, essentially converting rocket fuel to oxygen and water. Very very exciting stuff, and it's really fun to think about the fact that he essentially does what we do with rocket fuel, but extremely slowly.
I am not fully sure what you mean via strike by the AEG or AEG, but maybe Adam knows. But if not, if you could clarify what you mean by that, that'd be great. Oh, and I didn't realize earlier that you posed that as a question about the nitty gritty of the survival techniques, which is basically what my question was anyway. Is like, oh yeah, the radioactive box, yeah. So same thing as you, Adam. Then, which I found it extremely humorous, but actually one of my favorites was I love when people MacGyver stuff out of like old technology too. So one of my favorites was using Pathfinder to make a communications array and being like, yeah, so like I love that he is like, well, how do we get through this? Oh, we're gonna like I'm gonna go find this little, you know, I'm gonna use history, I'm gonna use navigation, I'm going, you know, it takes all these little bits to make it happen, and it turns into something that is ultimately what saves him, you know, and yeah, and it is hard to ignore the actual botany and potatoes of it, you know, like that's I hesitated to say anything about that because it is like upfront the main thing that like, you know, he's a botanist, like that's how, you know, kind of what he does. But it is really cool, and one of the bits of science actually that doesn't show up in the movie but does in the book that I really liked that they mentioned is the specifics of the necessary microbes to make the dirt actually produce potatoes, you know. So less the potatoes and more that specific bit of like he had a bit of seed earth to have like the microbiome that he needed to grow plants, because I think in growing plants that's something, or growing anything on earth, I think that's something that's overlooked a lot, is like everything's made up of tiny little shit. Well, in this case, I guess literally too. Um, but microbes make up a huge part of why our ecosystem works and why it's such a rarity in the observable galaxy. Really, is you need to be able to have every little bit of it, and that in general was something I liked about the science of this. Is it got down into, for lack of a better term, the nitty gritty of like every little bit that goes into this.
Yeah. That kind of hit on it, but specifically what V.S. Drake was asking, what did you think about the nitty gritty survival techniques?
I liked hearing about them, because I also grew up doing a lot of learning a lot of survival techniques and learning that hey, I have transferable skills that would help me on Mars, while also being like, damn, I didn't think about a lot of shit that could have killed me on Mars. I think it did a really good job of showing how much thought has to go into every little bit of planning for survival, let alone in what is effectively the harshest environment that we know, and that's in space, like outside of our planet, which is hostile enough as it is. It was really, that's actually a good way of putting it, V.S. Drake, is it feels like a really good world world building through like a world that we think we know, but we really don't, and it shows you how much we miss until we really get down to it, like what makes the survival. It's not just a survival technique, it's what makes that survival technique work.
Yeah. What I liked about it is a lot of the times in sci-fi stories, you come across situations where it's this thing needs to happen. Well, there's technology that does that thing. And that's how authors write in situations or conflict is, oh, well, I needed my characters to be able to travel faster than light, so they have a faster than light engine. Solved. Where with this book, it's what would make sense for them to have in their Martian habitat, the oxygenator, the water reclaimer. Those are all things that make sense for them to have. And instead of being oh, Mark can survive on Mars because technology has progressed to a point where, oh yeah, he just survives. The author took the time to be the water reclaimer can break down because too many minerals from his plants got into the water and clogged up the filtration system. The hab has a specific lifespan where if you use it too much, it's going to rip. Stuff like that is stuff that we would actually expect to happen in real life. And the fact that The Martian had those things in it just made it feel real, feel more enjoyable as a story. And I think did really the author Andy Weir did really, really well keeping it real for a sci-fi story.
Well, yeah, and V.S. Drake mentions that they use it as a tool to create tension, and to your point, Adam, that's what makes it feel real, is that tension is made with these tools that have very real consequences to their use. It's not hand wavy with it, like you said. It's not like you get faster than light travel, because there are science fiction elements to that. They use for instance, they use an ion engine in the Hermes. Well, the ion engine doesn't just mean like, oh yeah, we can go faster, we can get back to him faster. No, it's still an ion engine, which is very good at acceleration, but it's shit at deceleration and maneuvering. So how do you deal with that? Or like you said, the water reclaimer is like, yeah, he has effectively an infinite source of water as long as that's working, but what are the things working against that thing working? So it the science of it lends both the greatest tension and the greatest like relief all at the same time, which is pretty cool. Wait.
Actually, good with speed, not acceleration. I think they do mention that in the book. The ion engine accelerates really slowly, but can get up to a really fast speed.
Yeah, sorry, I misspoke. Thank you for correcting me, via Strike. Yeah, it's good with speed, but it's terrible with acceleration and deceleration. And in general maneuvering. But who needs maneuvering when you've got the Earth to slingshot you back to Mars?
Hand over the nerd card.
Hey, I only have
dare
one
you
strike
not know
on
this
it.
one detail.
Apologize for the coughing, coming off a little bit of a sinus infection, folks. But so we're laying a lot of praise down on this. Oh, did you have something, Adam? Go ahead if you did.
I was just gonna kind of similar to your question, but go ahead.
Well, if you have something, I'll let you go. Like mine's more of like if it's a similar thing, I'd rather keep on the similar topic, and because mine's kind of a shift away.
Okay. Did you think anything was too much of a hand wave? Like, do you feel like any of Watney's get out of trouble solutions was a little bit overhanded and not earned?
I don't know that any of it was not earned per se, but let's see. I'm trying to think of my way through this because there wasn't anything that like outright stood out as like blatantly really bad. I think the closest thing there is to it is the fact that the potatoes were there, like like having that because it happened to be Thanksgiving. Like he has a reason for it, I get it, but the fact that he had potatoes and that they were able to germinate and that they had like he was a botanist and he was there to be testing viability of agriculture on Mars. I get that, but like they sent him with the box of dirt but not any seeds, but they sent him these potatoes which are specifically very hardy for what they are. They grow quickly. Is having that specific thing there, and that's the most like hand wavy thing I can think of aside, because almost everything that he did came with some kind of consequence or later failure, or something that he had to deal with. And that was like, and I know that technically that happens with the potatoes too, but it's literally the only reason he survived, and it's because he just happened to be there over Thanksgiving. But like that's the only thing I can really think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, he got lucky on that one. So you gotta wonder if this story were true. Do you think they'd start sending potatoes with every hey, if you get stranded on Mars, plant these potatoes.
Well, yeah, is that going to be like the standard from now on? Is just in case you get fucked over? Rather, yeah, we're not. And VS Drake is right. He did have some, like, essentially he had grasses and like some weed flower, like not like weed like marijuana, but like weed type flowers that are very hardy and easy to grow. But like as far as like crops go, there was nothing there to test because he was only supposed to be there for what, like 31 days or something like that. So really yeah, and like potatoes, for as prolific as they are, take like like what is it? I think he said like 90 days usually to properly grow to full. So but it still felt like that's the bit that feels like the most hand wavy. And was there anything else that stood out to you though, Adam?
I just don't know the technology well enough to assess whether or not it was a bit of a hand wave, but I felt like the fact that Pathfinder could talk with the rover seemed coincidental.
That's actually a really good one, and I genuinely don't know enough about that either. They do a better job in the book of explaining how that works, like how they're able to upload like an actual operating system. I think in the movie they talk about like, yeah, you just enter these 12 commands and all of a sudden it can like communicate. No, it was a whole operating system that they found a way to basically like they had to find a clever way to compress the text of the operating system, but that was about it. So, but yeah, I think that's a good example too. Why don't we go with VS Drake's question then? Did you think this book will change space travel going forward, and if so, how? Keeping in mind this book was written in 2011.
Yeah. I don't think it will change space travel, just because as a in a world scope here, we've already talked about going to Mars and potentially leaving people on Mars, and um, I think we've already found that it's just not a feasible thing to do, and with our current technology, it's not like we're waiting, right? We're waiting for technology to give us an answer to how do we survive on Mars. So I think it's a good book that exhibits the challenges that would be for seen on Mars, but I don't think it's going to really change anything currently.
Yeah, it's a lot harder for science fiction that is this much science and that little fiction to ultimately change space travel, because a lot of this stuff I know that Andy Weir borrowed from like talking with NASA engineers and the people who do this preparation. But I do think it will change space travel, because I think this book is the kind of book that may inspire people to get into science and in particular space exploration. So I think in that way this has the potential to change it for the future, because it makes it feel it gives you a very realistic look at what it is, but it also makes it feel accessible. So I think this is the type of book that may change it in that way, but I don't think it's the type that is going to be like, hey, we got this new technology or process out of this, because I think a lot of this was just, I think the brilliant bit that Weir did was taking stuff that had already been thought about, talked about, and putting it in such a way that it was accessible, entertaining, and well written enough to inspire people going forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my take on that particular question. VS Drake says they love the idea of this being a good survival situation example. I mean, yeah, it's definitely an interesting, very detailed thought experiment. Not something I think many of us are going to have to deal with, at least not in our generation anyway.
Hopefully not.
I mean, like just like being on another planet in general. I think what the first estimated like launches out to Mars, like manned missions to Mars, are still like 8 to 10 years out or something like that. But that's assuming funding keeps up, and that's another way I would hope that a book like this would work, is that it might speak to the right people to get them interested in a way that might provide funding as well, because that is not a given You know, as much as we like to hate on, as much as I know a lot of people like to hate on the director of NASA for his like thinking about whether or not they're going to get funding for certain things based on how they treat the situation. It's a very real concern.
Yeah. Can't have that bad PR ruining your future trips.
Well, all right. I think I'm going to go ahead with my question then, and is like, and it actually isn't as far away from your question as I thought it might be. But was there anything about this book that you felt was unsatisfying or not well done, or anything you disliked?
Um, you know, I'm trying to think of something. This book, it was incredibly compelling from start to finish. It's enjoyable as a reread. It's not a heavy thinker, I don't think. I think it makes you think about stuff a whole lot. You know, it's not like a deep thought thing. It's more like a interesting and fun story. I would say that's it. It's just it doesn't provoke deep thought really. It's just an interesting story.
Yeah, I think the closest I came to deep thought was like, what would how would I be doing mentally if I were in that situation? Assuming I had the same skill set, how would I mentally deal with it? But like that's about as close as I got. The question is like, what did you dislike or find unsatisfying about this book? Like, was there do you have any criticisms of it in any way? And I think for me, one of the trickiest bits of getting through this book, and I know part of it is uh, I understand the justification of it, and I'll go through it in a second. But I had trouble with the fact that, like, yeah, I get Murphy's Law is kind of a thing, but holy shit, everything going wrong all the time, all over the fucking place. Like, at a certain point, fucking what? Like, have something go right. Like, I get he gets there in the end, but like, there's some things that felt like, damn, he earned his way here, and you have to just keep doing it. And it felt a little hard to get through towards the end sometimes. But it was all justified, and that's such a minor criticism because it was worth it. Because like I know the justification is that Weir is trying to show you all the different ways that things can go wrong in space and give you an idea of what it really is like. You know, like, and unfortunately he only has one character to do all of these things to, you know. Like, it was one of the things I liked about the movie that I is that they got rid of a couple little things, like there's supposed to be the dust storm before he gets to the lander. The fact that he rolls the entire fucking EVA vehicle, you know, like the rover. Sorry. Yeah, it is very much a man versus nature thing, and nature has a lot of different ways to fuck you. Especially when that nature, especially when that nature is of an alien world. It's just, man, at the end, you just want them to have a fucking win, and there are things that felt like I get that they were done because it presented a new problem to navigate and a way to navigate it, both literally and figuratively in the example. She's a nice lady, but she's also a sloppy bitch. Chemistry's a part of her. But yeah, that was a bit tough for me. And I think you're right, Viz Drake. It was kind of. I think there are things about like I get that they talk about it with the shrink, but Mark being as sane as he is by the end of it, like, holy shit, you are the most resilient human being ever to fucking live. Except maybe Holocaust survivors, you know? There's just, or people who've survived the like, but like, yeah, I can see that being a bit like unsatisfying. Is like, yeah, I wanted them to go a bit more crazy, and they show a little bit of that in the movie, but yeah, I think in the book they maybe could have gone into that a little bit more, but maybe that's just not Andy Weir's specialty beyond being like, yeah, we chose this dude because he fits in with any group, and apparently that group also includes himself.
He had the robots.
Well, yeah, and eventually he is able to communicate with people, but it's still slow, and he's not actually around anybody. And for an apparently social person, his ability to handle being alone, so like, could have been explored maybe a little more.
So what did you find? Yeah, you probably answered this already, but what did you find least realistic?
Least realistic? The Chinese and Americans working together. That might, but honestly, like, I got that bit, and I like that in the book they actually talk a little bit about the political favors being exchanged to make it happen. They kind of hand wave that a bit in the like movie version of it, and I just don't think that people would just like go behind their countries for a single person, especially since NASA might be the exception, but in a lot of places, when you're that high of a level in any government organization, it's pretty political. And these days, I think it's pretty unrealistic for people to like not make the political decision. However, I do think it was realistic that an underling was like, well, that actually, they undermined their superior and did the right thing. Like, I think that might happen. But I also don't think it's realistic to keep your job after telling somebody, your boss, that they're a fucking coward.
Watney's life was on the line.
What about you,
There's no
Adam?
time for firings. Well, two things. One, I read that storms do not get that strong on Mars, and that the strongest storm on Mars would be comparable to a light breeze here on Earth. So the whole tilting the MAV is 100% impossible. So that's a bummer.
You know what? I totally forgot about that, but I actually remember reading up on that because, well, they talk about it a little bit, how the lack of density of air in Mars would not allow for winds that strong. They can get that fast, but because you don't have the density of air, it's not ever going to have the force. This is a basic law of physics: force equals mass times acceleration. There's no fucking mass there for it to do anything, especially not against something that apparently weighs like several hundred tons.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can. The winds can whip up a lot of sand, but usually speaking, it's not going to be enough to move that much. And I forgot about that a little bit. So thank you for bringing that up. That was a good catch. And you said there was a second thing?
Yeah. Maybe this is just a little cynical, but I can't believe that NASA didn't just hide the fact that Watney was alive.
Yeah.
Oh no, our satellite didn't take an image for 20 minutes. How weird,
And I think that plays a lot, pretty close to my like political bit. Is like there might be some people who would try and do I could very much see there being somebody trying to turn it into a cover up, but they are right in that NASA is, everything is made available to the public. The question is how much attention are people actually paying to what they're posting? So And how much do people actually care about it? And that I genuinely have no idea. For all I know, the people at NASA are exactly as displayed, and if that is the case, then fucking awesome. Because like for somebody to just be more concerned about, for like the worst of somebody to be like, I don't think we should take this less risky for the one person maneuver because we're trying to save 5 other people. If that's like the worst cowardice that there is at the head of NASA, then consider my faith in parts of humanity restored. But yeah, that might be a little shaky. Like I am a little surprised that the idea wasn't like floated, but I think the author, Andy Weir didn't want you outright hating anybody, and that would be very easy to hate somebody for just even suggesting that. And it kind of pulls focus away from the book's message. Via Straight, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Via Straight asked, what parallels do you draw between this book and Dead Silence?
Oh, way to bring up a book. What? It's been a year and a half since we did that one, right?
Yeah.
I think they are. I think for all the things that the Martian lacks, Dead Silence leans more into the things that it does lack. Like it does talk more specifically about the psychological aspects, and they have a lot of similarities in their premise of isolation and having to survive. Oh, so yeah, a year and
About a
some
year ago.
change then. I thought it was April. Not April, but I thought it was February, not April. So thank you for correcting me on that, VS Trade. I think that they have a lot of similar premise points, and they have characters that are kind of put up against similar odds, but in very different ways. And I think Dead Silence more focuses on the mental aspect of it and less on the science and survival aspect of it. And I think they kind of pair nicely in very different ways. But Dead Silence is going to be a lot tougher to read than but unless you prefer horror specifically, like horror and thriller specifically. But yeah, it's an interesting comparison. It's like one made it through fine and the other went maybe batshit insane. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, it's definitely a motivational story versus scare you shitless story. I feel like Dead Silence has the tech can hand wave any problem sort of thing, and obviously the Martian. We talked about what tech is available in the Martian already. It's interesting to see, a different take on space rescue, right? So they're both space rescue stories. One where the nature of the situation is what's at stake, and the other is human. The human element, is the problem.
Exactly.
So interesting to think about them and try and compare them, though.
Well, you mentioned earlier via Drake the man versus nature element, a part of The Martian, and you kind of brought that up too, Adam. And Dead Silence is definitely like more of a man versus self type of thing, right? There is a bit of man versus nature, and there's a bit, and I think that's what I meant about them being kind of like very similar, but like different sides of the coin, is they have elements of one another, but one definitely leans more into man versus self, and one leans more into man versus nature. And Via Strake says, yeah, there is a difference between thriller / horror and just having tension in a book, and it pretty clearly outlines it.
Shall we get into final thoughts, or do you have anything else you'd like to talk about?
I did have one more question, and I am currently, you're gonna have to give me like a little bit a second, because I lost it when I saw the results of our our latest book vote, and it just woof. I guess I was going to ask if you. Just this is more of a for fun thing, but and we've talked about it a bit, but what was your favorite bit of humor in this book? Or least favorite, if it.
I think it might have actually been like a movie moment. No, it was in the book. There was a moment. Gosh, I remember laughing at it so hard. Before NASA got reestablished communication with Watney, I forget what it was. They said something like, "I wonder what he's thinking about right now," and they cut to Watney, and he's, thinking about some super silly thing. Like they were talking about like, oh, it must be so hard for him, and he was just sitting there like shooting the breeze. I wish I could remember what it was that he said.
I know what you're talking about, and I'm pretty sure it had something to do with like Three's Company or something like that. I wonder what he's thinking.
Yeah.
Or Dukes of Hazzard or one of those other shows. I know exactly what you're talking about. My favorite was probably the little bit when they finally do establish communication, and he's like, "Man, it's fucking nice to see you guys, to hear from you guys," or something like that. And then they're like, "Watch your language, Mark." And he's, "Well, you can go fucking fuck yourself," and like just like goes off.
Oh yeah, Via Strike, the disco thing, that was funny.
Hey, if I had to spend multiple years on another planet listening to the same fucking songs over and over again, and it was literally one genre, I would hate that genre too. And I already am not disco is not bad inherently, but like I would absolutely grow to hate it if it was all I had access to.
My thought is like, well, at least I have never ever listened to disco before, so it would be interesting to listen to new music.
Well, I mean, everyone's heard at least some disco, even if you haven't listened to like a whole song necessarily. But damn, like what it makes me wonder is like, what kind of fucking person is like has a memory stick and loads it with one genre of music, and like a fairly specific genre of music too. Like it's not like they did rock or pop or R&B, which is like a pretty broad spectrum. It's fucking disco. That is such a limited era and type of music.
Especially considering like the time when this book came out, how big flash drives were compared to now. We've got like 2 terabyte flash drives and they're like $30,
Well, and this is also supposed to be like in the future from now. So you could like, that's the kind of technology I could ask you to hand wave, but I get it. Like it made for really good humor, and I do appreciate that. I also like the like offhanded stuff. Like he that Mark is just like, here's a whole bunch of science shit, and then at the end he like offhandedly is just like, why doesn't the boss hog just go to the Duke farm since they keep getting away whenever they're in the car. Just like offhanded shit like that. I think it was fun, and the humor does definitely, like, I think if it was just the science, if it was just the struggle, this would have been a much harder book to read, and I thought the humor was well placed and well done. And it served a purpose too, which is like, it wasn't humor just for the sake of humor. It was humor because, like, yeah, even shitty situations, there's humor to be found, which I think was pretty cool too.
I like V.S. Drake's comment too about, like, if you had a bag that you could pack to be stranded on an island with, what would it be? And then Watney has that stuff to entertain himself.
Yeah, you got everybody else's bag. Makes me wonder though, why didn't Watney bring anything?
I would assume he did.
Well,
but
I mean,
probably,
like, I think it had more to do with his botany stuff, but still.
he probably had stuff, but it was like, you think about what is interesting to mention. You don't mention your own stuff that you bring because you expected to have that already, where everybody else's stuff is interesting and new because you didn't know about it beforehand.
Yeah, still. V.S. Drake, if you want me to shut up, then we're gonna have to turn the show down off entirely. So
V.S. Drake
suck it
says
up, Buttercup.
it's time for closing thoughts. No, seriously. What were your final thoughts?
We're definitely into final thoughts. Overall, it's a book that, like, it's been a while since we've had one of these, but I think this is the kind of book that I could recommend to just about anybody, unless you, hell, I would even like try to force people who don't like science to read this book, because, like, fuck you, learn some science. But I think this is a pretty like a very well written book. It's fun, it's entertaining. You're right, it's not like a deep thinker necessarily, but it's one I think I could readily recommend to just about anybody at most levels of reading. I'm glad that we took the time, and I'm glad that I took the time to read it, because guess what? I think it's better than the movie.
For me, my biggest concern with this book was its rereadability. I know not everybody is into rereading books, but I personally really enjoy going back to a book and, rereading it and seeing what I missed the first time around. And I worried that the fact that this book relies heavily on the suspense of, will Watney survive? Will it be enjoyable as a reread? And I have to say, yes, it is extremely enjoyable on reread. I have read it a total of 3 times, and each time has been really interesting. And you do pick out a couple of details here and there every time that's like, oh yeah, I wonder about that.
Yeah, and it's not
really, really
long,
entertaining.
so it's not like you're trying to get through like 1,000 pages to pick out little bits. Like, you can pick out the fact that you can pick out little bits, like, even in your third read, you said, right, is pretty impressive, right? For as small as it is, which means rereadability and having that level of, like, size accessibility for what you're reading is pretty cool. V.S. Drake says they want to recommend it to everybody. Has a great message, and it's a great example of survival and fighting against and fending off death. I would have to tend to agree. And I think there's actually multiple messages you can get out of this, but much like the book and the movie, I really do love that idea of, like, everybody coming together for something bigger, and that something bigger is a single human life, right? Which is powerful. Yeah, definitely a great vacation book read. It's very. I don't personally wouldn't be able to set this down, but I think it's the kind of thing you could read and be like, oh, that's the end of this diary entry, or that's the end of this chapter, and be like, I'll come back to this, and you can still pick it right back up and not lose a step, really. Oh,
All right, shall we do next books and then what we're currently reading on the side? Sound good?
All right.
Next up, for June 24th is The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. It'll be a new one for me, so very interesting, like new books. After that is our beach read. Funny, we were just talking about beach reads. July 29th, we're going to be doing Happy Place by Emily Henry. It's a beach book, a very beachy book. So,
all right.
Yes,
so what are you?
That's all I know about it.
So what have you been reading on the side, Adam?
Yeah, V.S. Drake mentioned Brando Sando. I'm reading through the Mistborn series again. I currently just finished The Well of Ascension, which is the second book in Era 1 of Mistborn. I gotta say, I am more mature now than what I was when I first went through it, and I remember being pretty bored with book 2 originally, and wow, damn it, I found it so interesting this time.
Hey, this is why that's a perfect example of why we reread books around here and why we're okay with it, is because there's, especially if there's a big time gap between when you read them, is there's perspective shift. You get to learn more stuff about yourself and the book.
Yeah.
As for me, I kind of finished my Jules Verne kick. I got through as much of that as I could. Let's see, I'm trying to remember what was the last one that I read. I think the last one I read was The Mysterious Island. And then I just needed to take a break because that dude wrote a lot of stuff. They're not particularly long books, but there's also some stuff that is, shall we say, dated about it. Does not hold up well.
Did not age well.
No. So I needed to take a break from some of that, but I also started back in on the Magic 2.0 series. Let's see, I am currently on Out of Spite, Out of Mind. So, and honestly, glad I came back to that one because I did the first four books of it, and I was like, okay, I need to take a break, and then I was like, all right, came back to it and kind of fall right into it. So it's been fun revisiting something that's a bit lighter and more like high fantasy as opposed to something like, Journey to the Center of the Earth or Time Machine or things like that. So
Yeah, definitely a nice and relaxing read. Very entertaining.
Yeah, and I think on the docket, though, we just got recommended for the latest book in which series? Alan just dropped this for us in chat, I believe, a little while ago. For our this would be on our Discord. If anybody wants to come over, we do share books and stuff in our bookshelf subthread. The Silence of Unworthy Gods by Andrew Rao. So that one is going to be on my list very imminently as well.
Yeah, that was me. That's
Oh, sorry, that was you. My bad. I thought it was Alan. Oh, he dropped the Stormlight Archive thing. I had it mixed up in my head.
Yep. Jones Soda with Stormlight. Yeah, that's book 4 in the Arcane Ascension book series. Really, really captivating book series. I believe I think we read one of those for
we did.
800s.
I think we read the first one.
Yeah. So I'm really excited. I already purchased that, so that's gonna make its way into my side pieces at some point in the future. So,
Oh yeah, it's
very, very
definitely
excited to get back to that.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna finish my current book, and that'll be the next one that I read. And looking into chat, V.S. Drake's reading Arcanum Unbound by Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, we're definitely in our wheelhouses over here right now. But if there's any recommendations, not only for the reading on this channel, but if you have recommendations that you just think we should read in general, whether those be fiction or not, you can also give us nonfiction examples. Which was the other thing. I did actually read the biography of Steve Martin.
Nice.
Yeah, it was funny. Learned that he was a very the same and also very different from what I expected. So there's some good nonfiction stuff out there, even if we don't read it on this channel.
Never done a whole lot of biographies myself, but that's interesting.
It's an autobiography, or at least
choice.
he reads his own. I believe it's an autobiography. I don't know if it was ghostwritten or not, though.
Interesting. All
right.
Let's see here. If you want to learn more about us, head over to dmstable.com. Anything you could ever want to know about us is right there. And look at your screen for our socials and Patreon links and YouTube links, all that stuff. Right. Alex, you got anything else for our captivating audience?
Captivating or captive?
Captive for our captive audience. Little do you know, you cannot hit the X until we're done chatting.
Just heads up, our next vote is going to be about back to school. So that's books about schools or that take place in schools, that sort of thing. And then after that, we're going to be doing for September, it's going to be back to the original recipe. That's right, it's KFC September. So start thinking that up. But if Halloween's your favorite, remember October, I think we're going to probably keep that in our horror genre as usual. So horror, thriller, that sort of thing. If you have your favorites, get those to us as well.
Yeah, let's get some scary stuff up in here.
Boo.
I currently sleep in my basement, so if you wanna scare the shit out of me every time I go to sleep, go for it. Yeah.
Make Adam go bump in the night.
Yeah, don't worry, VS Drake. I'll tell you later because it's gonna be the one I recommend.
All right, I think that's it, and thank you everybody as always for joining us. I know we only do this once a month, but I look forward to it every time.
Yeah, it's always a great chat. It's made greater with the interactions from the interwebs.
Love to have more of you around, and feel free to recruit as you so see fit. And we'll see you next book.
See you guys next book. Thanks for joining us.